defines a generation. Music is the soundtrack of revolution. Music is the soundtrack of movement. Music is the soundtrack of cause. There is an intersection of politics and pop culture that you didn't even know existed. There is some boy, some girl sitting in a cubicle along K Street, somewhere in DC. A boy, a girl sitting in a cubicle along a hill with a Capitol with a dome who has single-handedly decided what you wore today. Whoa.
Mike Muse is an industrial engineer, a music executive, a political architect. He breaks down the intersection of politics and pop culture. This is the Mike Muse Show.
What's up, world? It's your boy, Mike Muse, and we are back for another episode of the Mike Muse Show. We're excited to have you back and excited to have you join us for another fantastic conversation. We have had a ball talking with you every single week, and this week is going to be no different. It's going to be no exception. You know I love to intersect policy and pop culture and really peel back the layers of what is happening from sports to music to film to fashion and technology. But I thought what was interesting is for us to really focus on the video game industry. Video game industry is more popular than it's ever been. And I know growing up, I used to play Super Mario Brothers. I used to have a Nintendo set. I used to have a Sega Genesis. And I think I had there's another console that happened after that one, but I used to be a really big fan of it. I remember every Christmas I used to enjoy getting video games and literally opening them up and having my dad set the TV up in our basement so that I could play all day long. And since then, man, the industry has evolved. It's evolved to streaming now. I could have never had the foresight to even recognize that this could be a streaming endeavor and could be streamed every day on our laptops, on our cell phones, our computers. And so it's really, really wild what's happening. But there's also, too, been some unfortunate news that we have been witnessing within the gaming industry in light of the events that happened recently in Florida where the two gentlemen were killed at a gaming event. And so it's really brought and shed the light onto the mental effects of gaming. But what's really interesting is, media, political conversation and social discourse have normally placed the blame on hip hop and on music. Now they seem to be going to the film industry and television, and now it seems to be placing the blame on video games. And so I just want to have a conversation and figure out what is happening. Should the blame be on video games? Should it be on media? Should it be responsible? Is music responsible for a lot of the violence that we're seeing in America? Or are politicians and legislators too lazy to really fix the issue that is happening? And really, is it just too many guns are in circulation here in America? And do we need tougher gun regulations? And so what does that look like? And I've always thought we've had this conversation from a policy perspective, and we always had the legislators involved in it. But I thought it'd be really cool and interesting to have someone who's intimately involved in the gaming industry, someone who plays video games, someone who has ownership in the video game industry. And I found a fantastic guest. And before I say his name, I got to let you know it is the most coolest name ever. I've worked really hard to practice to get it down right, and I have a feeling I do not have it down right. But listen, as they say, shoot your shot. So I'm going to shoot your shot and see if I get it right. Luigino Gigante.
That's good.
Did
That's
I
very
get
good.
it?
Yes.
Yo! Luigino, you have no idea how
that's
excited
great.
I got that right, man. Names matter to me, man, and trying to get the name is so important. And so, listen, if I get it wrong again, and I probably will, just correct me again.
It's fine. It's fine.
But what a dope name that you have.
Thank you.
And I think you are meant to be doing what you're doing because I automatically think Super Mario Brothers and Luigi, right? And so how cool that you are now involved in the gaming industry. Just like my last name is Muse, right?
Yeah.
Like arts, entertainment, inspiration. And here I am talking to you on a radio show.
This is great, actually. We fit our roles very, very well, actually.
Yeah. So, Luigino, I know you are. What's cool about you is you actually own a video gaming cafe.
Yes.
Right here in New York City.
Yep. I own Waypoint Café NYC. We're located at in the Lower East Side at 65 Ludlow, between Broome and Grand. We've been open for about a year now.
Okay.
We focus. We call ourselves the premier esports cafe. So we're not just about playing video games and everything like that. well, also about fostering a community and like how coffee shops have always been. Like you go there, you go to relax, have a nice cup of coffee, have some good food. So we do
Yeah.
bits of both worlds.
And world, for those of you not familiar, the Lower East Side is where the cool kids hang out. And so that is a really cool part of New York City and some really cool cross streets too, man, that you guys have. I also thought that it was important to bring you into this space too as well because unfortunately the incident occurred at a video game tournament. And so I want to talk to you a little bit later on in the conversation about space and the safety of the space and how you guys are thinking about that too as well. But how did you just get into video games? You heard my origin story around Christmas and Super Mario Brothers and Nintendo, but how did you get into it?
For me, it's actually my 6th birthday. I was given an N64
Oh, yeah.
with the game.
That's the handheld one, right?
Nope.
Oh,
That was
no.
the home console. You're thinking of the Game Boy.
Ah, Game Boy. Okay, yes.
Both my parents are, well, my mother's more so of a nerd than my father.
Got
but
it,
he always
yeah.
kept up with technology because he said, hey, this is great tech. It'll be good for the future. But for my 6th birthday, I was handed a Nintendo 64 with Super Mario 64. And I put so much time and effort over the summer playing that game. When I finally beat it, it was right before school. Went back to school, and a lot of my friends were like, oh, well, I didn't have this game yet. How about we trade? So we were trading games.
Yeah.
Throughout our entire school year.
Yeah.
So from there, when I entered high school, podcasting became a thing.
Okay.
When iTunes first released podcasts, me and a group of friends, we did a few podcasts talking about video game news, especially when the Wii came out, the Nintendo Wii, which actually kind of changed video games from being the thing that was done in the basement or like the kid's bedroom to the living room. It opened it up to everyone.
Yeah. It became a very family-oriented activity. And I remember sometimes people as like a housewarming gift would give them the Nintendo Wii system, right? So that
was
could
a
be an
thing.
icebreaker. Or it was also great for the holidays too.
It was,
right?
yeah, it
In
was one
terms
of the
that.
hottest consoles at the time. Then come around the 360, PS3 time, gaming started ramping up a bit more. And then in the early 2000s, we had esports start to come out.
Yeah.
They came out from South Korea with a game called StarCraft, which is considered the grandfather of all esports. It's a competitive game, an RTS. You have an army, opponent has an army. You have to destroy each other's armies. It's about economy management and all that.
Okay. What's interesting about even you talking about like economy management, the level of sophistication that actually goes into gaming, right, is just not on the surface level. It may look like just a shoot 'em up kind of game, but there's so many worlds that are actually involved into it, and it's almost like the Sims system, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of individuals may not play video games, but I believe we've all had touch points around the Sims society. When you look at the Sims, can you talk about a little bit about that in terms of the world that's created there and how the worlds are created now in the video game industry, such as like Call of Duty, Call of Duty.
Yeah, Call of Duty.
Yeah.
Well, those are two different genres of games.
Yeah.
The Sims games, they're actually from a full genre that became known as simulation or Maxis games because those were the developers. One of them was SimCity, SimAnt, SimTown, and then The Sims, which was all about simulating families, resource management. They're more top-down, more about interpersonal behaviors and things like that. While you move on to Call of Duty, which is known as a first-person shooter, that's more about they were originally story-driven games. So it was one person versus an entire world. So the world was developed, if you go to the very first one, Doom, really. Doom was about a space marine whose group accidentally opened the doors of hell, and you have to make it out of there alive. So you're fighting demons and things like that. While Call of Duty has always taken place originally took place in conjunction with the History Channel to have another way of teaching about World War I and World War II. They've since broken from that and became this. It became a competitive game.
Wait, stop. So I didn't know that. So Call of Duty was originally a part of the History Channel.
It was
to teach an origin story about a unique way of discussing history.
Yes.
Did not know
if
that.
If you look at Call of Duty 1 and Call of Duty 2,
Yeah.
they both have the History Channel logos on the box art.
Did not know that.
The reason why was I think at the time the History Channel and their parent company were looking at different ways to teach the stories and the horrors of World War I and II.
Wow.
And how hard the soldiers actually had it. So a lot of those things have actual letters that were written, that were intercepted and kept for historical stake, as well as war footage.
Wow. Did you know that world? Because I absolutely did not know that. I could be slow a little bit. I like to think of myself as a trendy, cool kind of guy who's up on all the trends, but that one, I did not know that. So then, Luigino, how did it transition to what we know Call of Duty today to be?
I believe that they were only on contract for 2 games.
Okay.
So after that, Modern Warfare, the first one, came out, I believe. And from there, the game started taking on they started writing stories. They started creating these stories. And then they started focusing on the multiplayer where people can actually sit down next to each other and play against each other. And it became more kind of like the fighting game community with old arcades.
Yes.
Street Fighter, Tekken,
Yeah,
all those. It's all about who's the better. Yeah, it's who's the better game.
Yeah, those sound effects, man, had the coolest sound effects going.
Oh, yeah. And it's all about...
I remember I used to scroll the console so much to get the right player. And I would always pick the individual who had like the biggest muscles and the brawniest and the biggest, the fattest kind of character. And I would always still lose. And
those tend to be like the
most
boss
skinniest
characters.
Ones. Yeah.
Yeah, those tend to be the boss characters. Yeah. They hit hard, but they're a bit slow. So
Very
you have to time
slow.
everything.
Yeah. They don't have the agility going,
no,
right?
Yeah.
So I learned then to like really focus on the skinny players with the agility.
I tend to play mid-range.
Okay.
So they kind of fit in between both.
Yeah.
They're also known as glass cannons. So they have the lowest health.
Okay.
But they do the most damage.
Now, I may be dating myself here, but tell me a little bit. In the gaming industry, do you still have those hack moments where, remember, I think it was a Sega Genesis, Nintendo, you can do A, B, B,
yep,
up, down, left, right. So it's hacking things.
Yeah.
Still. See, I'm getting my street cred back, gamers. I know a little bit, so don't judge me too harshly.
There are certain games that still have, they're now called Easter eggs.
Okay.
Developers put them in as callbacks to older times, things like that. The one that you mentioned is known as the Konami code, which is the infinite life code.
Yeah.
That does show up in a few different games that aren't actually developed by Konami.
Oh, got it. So, how then did we go from this moment where we're playing Super Mario Brothers and we're having Sega Genesis and we're doing those type of games to where we are now with more violent nature games? What was, if you will, the game that kind of began the transition? Was it Grand Theft Auto? Did it come a little bit before Grand Theft Auto?
There are 2 games that are actually associated with this. The first is Mortal Kombat, which was the first game to show simulated blood on the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. At the time that it came out, there was a slight controversy, and that's because on the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System, it had green blood. The Genesis had the red blood.
Got it.
So there was that. The second game, or group of games, were by ID Software.
Okay.
Doom, which is the original FPS, and then the games that spawned after that, which are Wolfenstein. Wolfenstein was, you play an alternative history of World War II where the Allies lost, and you're this one person out to go kill Hitler.
Got it.
So
I take it that wasn't partnered with the History Channel.
No, that was not. But Wolfenstein is still one of those games are mainly beloved, not for so much for the violence, but for the groundbreaking that they created. The tech around them. A lot of violence from video games are more used as just a way of a means of interacting with the game. Not every game is violent, but some games have more cartoonish violence, while others have more realistic violence. You've mentioned the Grand Theft Auto. There are 2 games when I think of Grand Theft Auto actually that stick in my mind. One is San Andreas, and one's the most Grand Theft Auto 5.
Yeah. Isn't The Rock in the San Andreas movie? Or is that completely different?
I think that's completely
separate. Okay.
That is completely. He is in something called San Andreas. I think it's the earthquake movie.
I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
Sorry to Rock and throw you in this. Please don't be mad at me. You're still the greatest, The Rock. Yeah.
He just did a video game movie, actually.
He did?
Yeah, Rampage.
Oh, well, I'm not too far off, Rock. I knew something. Yeah.
No, but those games, yes, there's violence, but for especially 5, they went and interviewed actual gang members and everything to make it not so much realistic, but to say, hey, these are things that actually do happen. Another game that I think of is it's from Sega, and it's considered the Grand Theft Auto, but in a different kind of way of Japan, and it's Yakuza, the Yakuza series.
Okay.
The developers go out and they actually interview Yakuzas. They ask them to make it like, tell us like your problems, tell us your stories. Really, video games are just another form or medium to telling stories, just like any movie or any book. The difference is that it's more interactive.
Yeah.
That interactivity, though, also leads to a much stricter rating system.
Mm-hmm.
So I mentioned before Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, you did. Yep.
After Mortal Kombat came out, U.S. government asked the video game companies, like, should we have a rating system for this?
Mm-hmm.
And what was established was the ESRB rating system.
Yep.
Now, the ratings go from E for everyone to AO, which is adult only.
Mm-hmm.
These rating systems are actually much more conservative than TV. When ESRB actually does the comparison, a episode of Law and Order SVU would be rated as adult only.
Okay.
Which is considered a death sentence for a video game.
Yeah, I can
Means
imagine.
no one wants to play you.
Yeah.
So
So it's interesting. So you're actually brought in the policy aspect of it, in particular the rating system, because although I brought in The Rock into it, someone comes to mind, Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was a former governor of California. There was a case that got brought up in 2011 where Brown v. EMA, and that became a really pivotal point within the gaming industry that began to try and regulate the violence that you actually are talking about. And they tried to have government regulate it from that perspective. It won within the lower court system to where Arnold Schwarzenegger actually signed it into law, which I thought was a little bit, the hypocrisy of it, if you will, that Arnold Schwarzenegger is such rooted in movies that are so violent in nature, if you will. But what's really good about that, though, is that it later went on to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court actually overruled the lower court decision. And in it, I'm going to read a statement from you, from this statement, and get your opinion on what it said. It said the Supreme Court has said that restriction of speech, even that is accessible to minors, is inherently dangerous to democracy unless there is evidence that such speech presents a clear present danger to the health of society. It is now clear that even ultraviolent games, whether we like them or not, present no such danger. The Supreme Court made the right call in Brown v. EMA and in one small way helped to protect one pillar of American democracy. Do you guys always have to wrestle with this spirit within the gaming industry?
Yes. Actually, growing up, it's interesting. I was 10, I want to say. I might be wrong. When the first famous school shooting happened, which was Columbine. Columbine was very planned out, very methodical and everything. But the media instantly shifted the blame from misunderstood youths to actually Diablo and Doom and rock music and specifically Black Sabbath, which actually made me laugh.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I think it's because growing up, video games were always to blame. We had Virginia Tech. CSGO was blamed. We've had numerous school shootings, sadly, in the U.S., and a lot of things, they tend to blame media. Yeah. The issue here is, what about violence before video games came out? Could you say, was that music? Could you say that was TV? Could you say that was just stories, just regular stories? Violence has been with us since the very earliest of mankind, really. There's also been countless studies, more long-term studies that have proven that there is no casual link between violence and video games. They've showed, if anything, people who play violent video games tend to be more peaceful and more reserved in committing violent actions because they already know what the consequence is.
What about this term gamer rage that's come into our conversation? You mentioned Columbine around video gaming, and that gamer rage really became a moment around the unfortunate events that happened around Sandy Hook and that. So how did gamer rage come into our lexicon, and is that a real thing, and does that exist in your opinion?
It's two things, actually. There are two definitions of gamer rage. There is gamer rage that exists in terms of people raging when something bad happens, just like how fans of like the Yankees will scream and yell, or even in football will yell at the umpire because they made a bad call that they don't think was an actual issue. That happens in video games. You have people, it's like, especially in a lot of online games where it's like, if you're not playing with friends that you know and you're playing with a random person on your team and they drop the ball and it's something that you need, then it's like, yeah, you get upset. Then there's the media take of gamer rage, which is this kind of narrative where it's like, oh yeah, all video game people, they don't have control over their own impulses and anything like that. And the reality is none of that is true. In the heat of the moment, you could say the same thing about, say, Yankee fans, where it's like, or which fan? Trying to think, was it Philadelphia where there were the riots after a certain team won? I'm trying to remember.
For baseball, football?
I think it was maybe the football or hockey, one of the two.
Yeah.
So,
football, yeah.
well, I don't hear people talking about sports fans' rage in that kind of sense. So it's kind of like a double standard created by the media because they don't fully understand because it's something new and new things are scary.
Yeah.
So instead of trying to learn to understand it, they pull back from it and kind of turn it into this boogeyman, which is where the gamer rage in terms of the media idea comes from.
Now, what about as a player, though? Because we touched on a little bit about the e-games and the e-teams that are happening in these major tournaments. So, yes, media is they own a responsibility and not understanding the nuance what's happening by gamer rage. But a lot of times you'll hear and talk about like the mental toughness on players, and you'll hear the social media outcry that this player wasn't tough enough to handle the game or to handle the tournament. Can you talk to us a little bit about the pressure that are on like these star players now? Because now what's interesting, Luigino, is that gamers now are becoming celebrities, right?
Yes.
And gamers now have bigger following sometimes than musicians or than actors. And it creates a community like online and social media, and there is discourse where there is negative taunting, right? And so I'm just curious, and how do you see that as having an impact on the mental state of mind of the gamers?
I think that's more of here's how gaming as a community is always, if you look at any small community, the problems of larger society seem to be amplified because you're looking at a very specific group of people. So that's more of the mental health and stresses on almost any professional athlete. In gaming, it's viewed on because it's more of a mental sport than anything else. So when you look at it like that, yeah, these kids are under a lot of stress in the US, in Korea, in Japan, in Europe, in South America. Yes, a lot of these kids are under a lot of mental stress, and a lot of the teams have started to actually form programs around. One of my biggest issues in esports recently was the Overwatch League, and it was something that I did talk about a few times with a few people. I thought that the schedule was a bit too demanding. They were playing every week. These were a lot of kids were actually brought over from their home countries of Korea, flown into Los Angeles. They were playing every week, twice a week, towards weekends and things like that, in front of on a stage, in front of a bunch of people, and that affects people. I thought that the schedule was a bit too strenuous on the athletes, and we saw that some athletes were very unhappy with their situation because they basically picked up their entire life, moved to LA, and now they're living with 5, 6, 10 other people that they don't know that well.
Yeah.
And that's strenuous for anyone.
It is.
In sports, we have a better handling of that because there are more unions. In gaming right now, there are no unions.
Because it's so new.
It's very new. It's very new.
Well, what's interesting about this conversation, ladies and gentlemen, is that there's so many aspects of it that we can talk about it from, because, as Luigino said, it is so new. But coming back, I want to keep the conversation going through Luigino in terms of the stereotypes of gamers, in terms of loneliness and isolated and mentally disturbed, and those are typical profiles that you hear of mass murderers and shooters. And I want to get your thoughts and opinions on that. I want to get your thoughts and opinions on policy, and I really want to ask you just a direct question. Are our policymakers just too damn lazy to relegate guns and gun control, and is gaming too easy to be the scapegoat? Listen, don't answer that now. We're going to come back. We're going to get into that. You are listening to the Mike Muse Show here on Sirius XM Insight Channel 121. As always, you can tweet us at I am Mike Muse, M-U-S and Sam E, and also too on the Insight Channel at SXM Insight. We'll be right back.
And now you hookers and hoes know how I feel. Well, if it's good enough to give off a proper chunk, I take a small piece of some of that funky stuff. It's like this and like that and like this, and it's like that and like this and like that, and it's like this and like that and like this, and Drake creep to the mic like a fan. Well, I'm peeping and I'm creeping and I'm creeping.
Cars really are all about style, design, speed, passion. I'm Daron Levine, host of In the Driver's Seat on Sirius XM Insight. In the Driver's Seat is about cars, number one. We're going to bring experts to tell you about what's happening in the automobile industry. Americans are all about freedom. Cars are the greatest expression of the people we want to be.
In the Driver's Seat with award-winning automotive journalist Daron Levine. Saturdays at noon East on Sirius XM Insight Channel 121. Or listen on your phone when you get out of the car with the Sirius XM app.
What you gonna do if I leave?
What's happening, ladies and gentlemen? We are back for the Mike Muse Show, having a wild, fascinating conversation on the gaming industry and the ecosystem of the gaming industry with who is now my new friend, Luigino. I just told him, like, I actually want to hang out with them and have some food and some beer and maybe play a game or two. Luigino, I think you can teach me a thing or two about some of these gaming so I can get beyond my A-B, up, down, left, right.
You're always welcome to come by.
Yeah. And the reason why I thought it was important for us to have this conversation is because, we just don't get a chance to talk to gamers from the first person perspective and, in quote unquote mainstream media in the national context. I feel like you guys, talk amongst yourselves, at your conventions and at your tournaments or at your meetups, but I felt like the gamer's point of view hasn't fully been allowed to have breath on national media.
Yeah.
So I thought it was important to have you on to do this.
It's interesting because we do tend to talk to ourselves. We do have a few spokespersons who have come out and talked about these things. A few of them mostly being celebrities, actually.
Yeah.
Like actual celebrities who already have a pull.
Yeah.
But now as esports have evolved, people are starting to realize that they represent the brand of gaming that specifically Ninja of Fortnite fame.
Fortnite, yeah.
He's been pushing for new initiatives.
Yeah. And for all my listeners out there who may not be familiar with Fortnite,
Fortnite is Epic Games Battle Royale. It was from originally a single player game that they had set up that you could play with some friends. They issued this free to play Battle Royale game after PUBG, and it has a building aspect, and it's basically Survivor to like last team survives.
Ladies and gentlemen, one thing you need to know about that is that Drake played this game live with actually Fortnite. With Ninja.
With Ninja, yes. He played with Ninja.
And it was already a thing before Drake, and then once Drake got involved, it became an even more thing. And shout out to Drake, man. I just went to his concert this week, man. He killed the concert.
Is that good?
Yeah, it was really good.
That's
but
good.
Speaking of Drake and now to talk about a little bit of hip hop, which is why I thought it was so important, is that I feel like the media and the national conversation, our politicians are so quick to blame hip hop for a lot of violence that we see within our country, and now I think that is shifting to the gaming industry, and I believe that sometimes hip hop and media is used as a scapegoat. For politicians not to do the tough calls on legislations on guns, right? And then we kind of come into the Second Amendment conversation, you know what I mean? And the right to bear arms, right? But at what point do we begin to do a hard look on the right to bear arms? And what does that look like for the amount of guns that's in circulation versus just saying, oh, let's just blame hip hop or let's just blame music or let's just blame the gaming? What is your reaction to that?
I have one of the more radical reactions to that. And one of my thing is it's a ticking time bomb right now.
Mm-hmm.
You have two generations that grew up with school shootings. You have the millennial generation, which is mine, and Gen X.
Mm-hmm.
The generation that's coming after that, as time goes on, more and more people are going to see what's the point of the Second Amendment if no one's really doing anything about these school shootings.
Mm-hmm.
Schools, video game cafes, things like that, conventions, these should be safe spaces for people to go and enjoy time, to get away from the day-to-day stress of life, things like that. The problem is politicians are either bought out completely. They receive tons of money.
Are you talking about the NRA?
Yes, the NRA.
You're in a safe space here. Feel free to talk your ish.
All right. Specifically from the NRA, if we look at the case in Florida, sadly, Florida has no background check system really, or it's a very loose one. It is an open carry and concealed carry state. It's a stand your ground law state where people have abused that law to get away with free murder, basically, which is terrible. And it sadly doesn't surprise me because a lot of the states that these things happen in are states that have very lax gun control laws. I believe in New York, anything that guns can't be painted like toys. It's almost impossible to buy even a Nerf gun from Amazon and have it shipped to New York City.
Yep.
Even props are very heavily regulated. On top of that, we do full background checks. We do, if you're on a domestic abuser list, you're not allowed to have a gun. And I think that's actually important. If people have a history of violence, it's partly on the state to actually protect its citizens.
Yeah. What's interesting about this, we're talking about video gaming
Yes.
and computers, and we talk about sims earlier, and we talk about simulations. But then you look at what's happening recently with this 3D gun that's come to light, and
Yes.
how easy it is for an individual to be able to make a gun off of 3D, which is a computer, which is a screen. And our politicians seem not to be up in arms about it. Now
Well-
we have our state attorney generals
Yeah.
who are pushing really aggressively to make sure that this individual cannot sell the specs, which he's planning to do for $10,
Right.
and then actually mail it off versus placing it on the internet. But there doesn't seem to be outrage from all of our politicians to protect this 3D printing.
The 3D
of a gun.
vendor, yeah.
Mhm.
Well, here's the thing. Actually, most guns are designed in computer-aided design programs like CAD and things like that. So there already are 3D renders of guns. The thing, though, about this one is the normal person does not have like I have a 3D printer at home, but I don't have the right material at home to be able to print it out where it would be safe for me. Most people need a degree in 3D printing. Part of the reason why I'm not super worried about that is 3D printers are still very, very expensive. They haven't entered the full day-to-day lives yet. And lastly, tolerances. Sure, you could 3D print a gun, but if the barrel is a centimeter or even a few millimeters too tight, the gun's going to backfire and you're just going to lose your hand.
Yeah.
I think that's more of the concern from the attorney generals that, okay, yeah, this can go out to people, but we're not going to have criminals running around. That's the most extreme view. It's more people at home are going to hurt themselves.
My point for bringing up the whole 3D printing of the gun was just in terms of where the outrage is,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
And we're replacing the blame, not so much on the technicality aspect of it.
It's-
There's a uniqueness of that. There's this visual simulated, which
Right.
also video games are simulated, but there seems to be the blame placed on the video gaming industry responsible for our violence, and yet there is no outrage, if you will, from our politicians across the board on either side of the aisle on this 3D style printing that could or could not become a thing or could not become a
half of
moment.
that is also mainly because half the politicians don't actually understand how it works.
Yeah.
So
I think we're finding that a lot lately with
Yeah.
our politicians.
Yeah,
even
we are.
They don't understand how Facebook works.
that was painful.
So let alone, I'm sure it's going to be difficult
Yeah.
for them to really even understand how gaming,
How gaming underworks.
How gaming interacts. But with that being said, Luigino,
Yes.
there is a really interesting study that came out from the American Psychological Association. Because now we talked a little bit about the politicians and
Right.
some of the laws regarding it. Now I want to do just a little bit of a deep dive into the mental health capacity because I teased out right before the break. We always talk about the profile of a mass shooter. Is this loner, this isolationist, this person who's just locked up in his room all day. They don't have any friends, and they play
Right.
video games all day.
Right.
And then there is a stereotype of video gamers that they're loners, they are socially void, they don't have any friends, and they're locked up in the room. And so there's overlap with that. So I want to hear your thoughts on that.
All
But
right.
before you respond to that, so the American Psychological Association put out this study about myths, facts, and unanswered questions relating to this. One myth that they said was that there are no studies linking violent game. There's a myth out there that says there are no studies linking violent video game play to serious aggression. They state the facts are high levels of violent video game exposure have been linked to delinquency, fighting at school, and during free play periods, and violent criminal behavior, i.e., self-reported assault, robbery.
Right.
What is your thoughts to this?
I need to know when that actually came out because about 2 years ago, York University released a 15-year study on violent video games on adolescents growing up. And what they noticed was within maybe the first 2 to 3 hours, yes, there was a rise in aggression, but after that time, overall, over that long time, aggression levels actually dropped. And part of the reason why is we're beings that learn through community. We're a very social species. And it is up to society as a whole to also teach other things. So as long as people understand that in a game, yes, shooting people, like if it's a war game, they're much more than like, oh, they're the bad guys, that's why you get shot, or that's why they're shooting at you because you don't disagree with each other. There's a lot more to it than that. And if people actually take the time, and that's another thing. I go back to the ESRB rating. A lot of it also goes on to parents. A lot of parents don't understand it, but 13-year-olds should not be playing Grand Theft Auto 5 or certain games that are rated for 17 and older, because there's a reason why the rating system exists. But the York University study showed that over a span of 10 years, aggression levels actually dropped in male participants. Critical thinking, though, went up, and being open to the other side and understanding points of view went up. So in that case, I don't know when the American Psychological Association put that out, but that was about 2 years ago from York, refuting that.
What's interesting about that, though, it was interesting you bring up the York study, and I bring up this study, is that there is competing interest in terms of really understanding the mentality and the impacts of the gaming industry. So to just do a broad stroke of let's blame the violence on the gaming industry when you have like these different studies that don't even match up to each other. Right. And so that's what makes this nuance, this conversation really difficult. I'm curious, just from your perspective growing up, you seem to be a very social guy, right?
Yes.
And you make your living now within the gaming industry. You seem normal for whatever normal means. You don't show any signs of gamer rage. You did pipe up a little bit though. We started talking about the NRA.
That's more political.
But I'm curious though, have you ever experienced any unfair stereotyping of yourself or profiling of yourself?
Actually, growing up, when I was in high school and everything, it was post-Columbine. There were certain students that were given different colored folders in the guidance counseling office. I only found out recently, like 2 years after I graduated high school, what that meant. And apparently they were grading at-risk students that could be potential risks. I've heard multiple stories from people that I play video games with. It's like, there were people who came up to me and was like, oh yeah, I'm your friend, but if you ever have like an issue like that, you wouldn't shoot me and things like that.
Oh wow!
So
friends will come up to you and say that.
Well, not to me, but they had that happen to them.
Wow.
While they were in high school, and I think that gamers have this terrible reputation of being isolated, of being loners, and the reality is, no, we just don't participate in the local group. We have found our own group that we get along with. Most of my friends I've made through online communities. With the access of the internet, I have friends who live in Japan. I have friends who live in Germany. I have friends who live in England. I have friends who live in California. I've never met them in person, but because we always play games together, we're always together in that sense. So if you were to think about it, like that's our tribe in that sense.
Yeah. How did that make you feel? I don't mean to make this like it's a therapy or sitting on a couch here, but I'm actually curious because, full disclosure, I want to be a little bit transparent too with you. Like, so I also too cover hardcore political news and, headline coverage of our day-to-day situations. And so like when these mass shootings occur, whether it's at a gaming event or if it's just in a local mall or wherever a public space is, I generally tend to talk about the profile type of the shooter. And sometimes I can be to blame for, not to be to blame, but sometimes I do mention those words like loner, right? Or they were by themselves. And so how does that make you feel when you hear those terms associated with gamers and to your friends?
Personally, it kind of upsets me because it means, well, you haven't actually taken the time to get to know a lot of people. If you go to PAX East, which is one of the biggest conventions, there's PAX Prime happening, or renamed as PAX West, this weekend. You have thousands of gamers coming together, and if there's any conflict, it's more between individual peoples arguing over something. But there've never really been huge issues. You just had a total $25 million tournament in Vancouver, Canada. 20,000 people in an arena. Not one issue of violence.
Yeah, that says a
Just
lot.
happening. So these are very isolated cases. Yes, they create these profiles because they need it's the media trying to create a narrative to sell a story in a way, maybe to sell their story. It's funny that you mentioned that because I mentioned Columbine before. The media created one thing, but about 3 years ago, a book covering everything from the mental health and everything of the two shooters of Columbine. The group of psychologists and the person who wrote the book found out that it wasn't so much the media that they consumed that made them do that. It was the media of this idea of what the perfect high school life was supposed to be, and they felt entitled to that. And when it didn't happen, their entire worldview collapsed. So it's more of society failing individual people.
Yeah. So, Luigino, let me ask you a question. Do you think the perception of gamers are changing now? And before you answer that, let me give some examples of what's coming to mind. It's really interesting that we're going here right now. I'm thinking about, in high school, there's like the cool kids corner, right? The cool kids sit at this lunch table, and then the others sit over there somewhere, whatever other means. And then that was what we see kind of exploding through the lens of the goth movement, if you will. But then all of a sudden, goth became chic and fashionable. So then they became normalized, whatever normalized means, right? So then we started seeing, Comic-Con used to be like this convention that was over there in the corner in San Diego, right? And, those who didn't sit at the cool kids lunch table were just over there and then playing in their costumes over in Comic-Con in San Diego. But now Comic-Con has extended to New York City, and it takes up the entire footprint of New York City, and costume culture is become a thing, if you will. Cosplay. Thank you so much. I couldn't get that word. Thanks for having my back, Obi.
No problem.
Cosplay has become a moment and has become a popular thing in our lexicon. I have friends over in China who really, shout out to Tony, who really gets involved in cosplay around comic books, and he does it really, really well. He has the best Batman and Superman and Spider-Man costumes I've ever seen. But now when we see the popularity of comic book films, like Black Panther, now we're starting to see those who were looked at as weird as cosplay becoming the cool kids now, right? And I'm an engineer by degree, right? And so the geeks, who were smart and did that, they were the others. But now they're the billionaires in Silicon Valley, right? So it's now everyone who wants to date them, right? And marry,
I get that,
right? So it's changed. So let's bring it back to gamers, because gaming and gamers have had this reputation of being the kids who sit in the corner, right? Not at the cool kids. Not being metaphorical, just for conversational
I understand.
purposes.
No, I get that.
They're the kids who sit in the corner and don't have any friends now. But when you see moments like Fortnite, and when you see moments like Drake beginning to participate in this, do you think we'll begin to see a narrative switch from like those over there to like, yo, it's a cool thing to do, especially with the esports, e-tournaments. There's championships now. They have houses. And it's a whole thing now.
It's actually started changing, I would say, in the mid-2000s. The narrative of gaming, part of that was because of Nintendo's success with the Wii. They brought the gaming from basement to the living room. And Microsoft and Sony trying to catch up with that by including things like Netflix and Hulu and things, and making their box like the entertainment box. Now, it's funny that you mentioned that, because what do you think the average age of the gamer is?
I actually think it's older. I actually think the average age of a gamer sits anywhere between 28 and 34.
Nope.
No way. Damn.
The average age is between 38 to 45.
These are people I hate being wrong. My listeners know I hate being wrong. Get out.
This has only recently changed. It used to be
28 to 34. Got
28
it.
to 34. Only recently has it changed, because you now have generations. A great example of this is Barack Obama grew up reading comic books. And he made that known throughout his entire campaign that Spider-Man was one of his favorite heroes. And we got stuff like that. And people started realizing, well, wait, there's a whole generation that grew up. They now have families. They now have kids. That means that they're raising these kids. And it's not so much it becomes normalized, it becomes mainstreamed. It becomes part of the main culture instead of a subculture. That's what we saw with the goth movement. We had a bunch of goths that grew up, had families, and their kids were socialized into these subcultures, and those subcultures became mainstream culture. That's just how culture works. I do think that gaming is becoming more and more mainstreamed. We now have clothing brands actually directed towards gamers. Meta Threads is one of the big ones. Jinx, they're really good, and they make what they're doing is also changing clothing culture. They changed it where it's like, oh, this isn't just for like guys and girls. Like Jinx actually makes pants, they're jogger pants that are really comfortable and everything, and they're like, oh, they're for both. Here's the size. Here are the sizes that we carry, and it's like, look, girls, you now have pockets that are functional.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in that sense, gaming is really kind of changing main culture to be more inclusive, to be more accepting.
Yeah. Well, with that being said, as we begin to close,
Yes.
I just want to talk a little bit about your cafe,
Right.
the Waypoint Cafe. But I want to use that as a metaphor for all the other spaces that exist in the gaming industry, such as the tournament, and what we saw take place in Jacksonville, Florida. And I want to take this time to pay my respects to the families of those who were deceased. The family of Elijah Clayton, who was 22. A shout out his gamer name, which was True Boy. Also, too, I wanted to take some time to pay my respects to Taylor Robertson and his family, who passed away at the age of 27, and his gamer name was Spot Me. So
It saddens me because, especially him, he went to that tournament to earn some just extra income for his
Wow.
family.
wow, that's sad, man.
Yeah,
That one
that
hit,
actually hurts a
yeah.
lot.
That hit me hard, man. Like, I'm not an avid gamer, for disclosure, but as you can see, I'm
Yeah.
aware of it. I grew up on it. It was a big part of my childhood and my memories, and so to see that happen was really unfortunate. And my nephew, there was
Yeah.
a time I couldn't get him off the video game console, and there was a moment where I was encouraging him to become a video game developer and programmer. But with that being said, though, how do you guys feel now about your spaces? Are you guys now thinking through that? And I guess what I mean by that, there's a moment if you think back to 9/11,
Yeah.
where we would go before 9/11, we would go through the airport.
No, yeah, I
10
remember
minutes
that,
before
yeah.
your flight.
Yeah,
There
I
was just
remember
no
that.
moment.
Now it's like 2 hours.
Now it's like
Ugh.
2, and that's if you're being good. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
that's if you're lucky.
Lucky,
Yeah,
right?
that's if you're lucky.
To get there. And so now, I mean, you guys, go to your cafe, no thoughts. You guys go to tournaments, no thoughts. Is this now in your minds now?
It actually been in our minds for a minute. Evo, which is the biggest fighting game tournament, happens in Vegas. Almost didn't happen this year. I was told for a few friends who know the organizers that Psy Games, a Japanese developer, stepped in and they only asked for free advertising on the entire stream. They'd cover the security costs because of the Las Vegas shooting. Comic-Con is going to have to double down on their security. PAX is already doubling down on their security. It's going to be hard, especially even with the cosplay community, because now certain items for cosplay are going to be most likely banned, or heavily regulated. As for us at the cafe, we have a tournament coming up. We have a viewing party coming up, and those who partnered with us to run these events, were asking because they're based in Germany. ESL One, the corporation, they asked us how I felt about should we get added security. Now, I know that it happened at another LAN center, which is known as GLHF, which is Good Luck, Have Fun. I'm connected through them through the same kind of time program that we use called GG Leap. I know that the owner is fully devastated right now, and I don't think that he's rethinking his security stuff as of yet, because it's still settling with him.
Yeah.
But for us at the cafe, one, space is an issue. I can't really put in metal detectors or anything like that. We have our security cameras, which is one thing. But the other thing is we're in a heavily residential area. We're across from a high school. So there are always officers on our block. I know that in our area, there's a bunch of bars if you go up the street, and there's always officers just making sure people are fine, things like that, because you know how people get too much to drink. They're there just to be sure. So the community that I am watches out for each other. We watch out for a lot of the kids and things like that when parents feel worried. It's like, oh, will it be safe? It's like, yeah, we'll watch them. Don't worry. We have a lot of local parents who send their kids to us because they'd rather them be with us, at least in a social setting that they know they're safe at. And that's the main focus of the cafe, actually. we're a gathering ground for people to have fun, play their games, meet new friends, make new friends, and just be safe.
So give out the location of the way.
Waypoint
Waypoint
is located at 65 Ludlow Street between Broome and Grand in the Lower East Side of Manhattan.
You guys have any social media handles, a website that people can go to when they come to town? They want to check you out.
Everything's the same. It's just Waypoint Cafe NYC. It's either waypointcafenyc.com, on Twitter, Waypoint Cafe NYC. Same thing with Instagram. So
I just wanted to just thank you, Luigino, for this conversation.
No problem.
Clearly, we have so much conversation to go.
Yeah.
There's so many other areas to
it's
talk
a very
about.
large. It's a very large topic.
I just want to just deem you right now our gaming expert for the Mike Muse Show.
Thank you.
So I want you to come back multiple times, and I want to talk about this terminology that we're hearing now, toxic masculinity. I want to talk about the gender biases that exist within that. And I was actually even watching a Law & Order episode about sexual assault that happens within the gaming community. So, ladies and gentlemen, don't tweet at me too heavy. I know I didn't cover all the topics. It's only an hour show. We only get to so much. But I just want to thank you guys all for listening to the Mike Muse Show. Feel free to reach me at I am Mike Muse, MUSSAME on Twitter and on Instagram. And also too here on Serious Insight at SXM. And for all the gamers out there, man, I just salute you. Keep playing. And I'm giving you thoughts and prayers for your fallen comrades. Once again, Elijah Clayton and Taylor Robertson. This whole point of this conversation was not to victimize or demonize or to talk about anything, but just to really bring the gamer's perspective into the national discourse. I will insert my opinion here, which I'm kind of slow to always do, is that I think it's time for our legislators to really make some tough calls and some tough decisions and stop being lazy and using gaming, music, and film as a scapegoat. Do they have some culpability? Probably so. But to what scale? Who knows? But it's just not solely on them. And so the blame lies with you, Congress, too, as well, for a lot of things that are happening. And as my guest Luigino just mentioned, the powerful NRA that has a stronghold on you guys for allowing proper discourse to go forward. So once again, you can reach us here at SiriusXM on the Insight channel 121. I am Mike Muse. Hit me up. Let's keep the conversation going. Thank you guys so much. Peace.